Hello? It works?
Yes,
Hope
sir.
everyone had good lunch. Welcome back. Anthony, welcome to Korea.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, I understood you flew in this morning. So what's your impression so far?
Listen, I love Korea. This is my sixth time here.
Yeah.
And it's a great country. It's one of the leading technological innovators. And obviously, your cryptocurrency markets are very deep
Yeah.
and super liquid. And so it's good to be here. You know, and I'm hoping we're closer to the end of a bear market.
Yeah.
You know, certainly we're closer than we were last year. So that's good news.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed as we were both out of New York most of the time is there's a huge difference in sentiment within the New York institutions. And then compared to Asia, what we see and observe through KBW and also somewhat translates to Token 2049 in Singapore and Hong Kong. Do you feel like the sentiment in New York has been, to put in crypto terms, down bad, the worst ever, or?
So I think it's very mixed. So let's start with Jamie Dimon, I think he's called Bitcoin a pet rock, a Ponzi scheme, a decentralized Ponzi scheme. I think there's a group of large-scale money center banks that have gotten guidance from the regulatory people that live inside those banks or their general counsels to be mean and nasty towards crypto.
Yeah.
Jamie understands it. He's probably one of the smartest people in financial services, but he's chosen that direction because that gives him an easier path with people like Gary Gensler. On the other side, you have people like Larry Fink or Abigail Johnson who have made a decision that they understand the technology and they understand that this is the future of finance. And so they're more entrepreneurial, they're less regulated, and so they've made a decision that they're going to make massive amounts of investments into the space. And so I like that. And so if those guys get their ETFs approved and they start gravitating business into that area, they'll push everybody else into the pool, because I don't see how a bank like JP Morgan has a huge private wealth management business. After an ETF is eventually approved in the United States, I don't see how they could not have one. I don't know how they could go into a presentation and when one of their potential prospects says, well, what's your digital properties or your digital asset strategy? They say, oh, no, we don't have one. Our CEO says that Bitcoin's a decentralized pet rock. I don't think that's going to play well. And so what ends up happening is if you just look at a Venn diagram, sort of a game theory analysis of this, once you get the ETF approved, I think it's a tipping point. You combine that with the halving that's coming likely in April, I think it bodes very well for the industry.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you think, understand you're also doing an Asia tour at the moment. A lot of folks are, especially from New York, London. Is there specific things you saw in this market that you found interesting and also that didn't, not too common in New York or something out of ordinary?
Well, listen, I mean, this is a deep market. Let's talk about China for a second. I think that President Xi was probably looking for some power consolidation over the past 18 months. And so I think certain things like Bitcoin mining, et cetera, got pushed out of mainland China. Although interestingly enough, 10+% of the market is still in mainland China. But I think that they've made a decision to allow for experimentation in Hong Kong, licenses in Hong Kong, the graduation into exchanges, et cetera. And I think this is just a very deep market. Listen, the growth of the world is here in Asia. And so an American like myself understands that. Whatever the long-term geopolitical issues are, I think they will transcend the current short-term geopolitical issues. And so I'll make a prediction that the U.S.-Chinese relationship is bottomed and going to start improving. I think Secretary Raimondo's trip last week was a big deal. I think it was a big signal to people that the United States recognizes the economic interdependency with China. And I think it's very important for us as business leaders to be here in Asia to push that agenda and to explain to our political leaders that it doesn't make sense for us to be fighting. We have to figure out ways to do more business together and to become more economically interdependent. And so less rhetoric, less hostility, I think is preferred. And so that's one of the many reasons that I'm here. As you know, we do something called the SALT Conference. We've done that in Singapore, we've done it in Tokyo, we've done it in Abu Dhabi, and of course in North America. We'll likely be doing one in Hong Kong over the next 12 to 18 months.
Going back to our previous discussion on the side stage about how SALT came to be, is there a specific reason you started a conference, specific vision, and how it helped SkyBridge as well?
Yeah, so our conference business was very accidental. We sort of backed into the conference business. It was the 2008 global financial crisis. At that time, the US government put a lot of money into the money center banks through the TARP program. And Barack Obama at that time, he didn't do it on purpose, but he basically said, now's not the time to go to Las Vegas. And if you're a fat cat, you should land your private plane. And so all of these big money center banks, including Merrill Lynch, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, because of the political environment, canceled their conferences in Las Vegas. And so we saw that as a big opportunity. We were buying rooms at the Encore Hotel, which is attached to the Wynn, for like $99 back in 2009. And so we started the conference in May in Las Vegas, small, it was only 300 or 400 people. By 2010, it got up to 1,200 people. And today, you know, our delegate sizes average between 2,000 to 2,500. And it has been a very big help to our business because there's a lot of cross-fertilization of ideas, potential marketing of our products. But I always tell people we didn't really do it necessarily for that. We did it more for the thought leadership aspect, and we did it more for the interconnectivity. Now, we did a Bahamas conference, which you attended, Justin, with Sam Bankman-Fried in April of 2022. And so that was quite a spectacular event. But unfortunately, Sam turned out to be somebody that none of us thought that he was. So we're not doing that event anymore for all the obvious reasons.
Speaking of the devil,
we'll be back. We'll be back.
Do you think, going back to all our mentions of government officials or regulations, we have seen drastic change on sentiment within New York and with government. What are you seeing day to day with your experience with government officials, with DC? For example, Blockworks, they're doing a big regulatory conference in DC, I believe, sometime in February or April next year.
Yeah, I think it's April.
So the whole focus has been shifted to regulation, government. A lot of those names come up. Is there a specific thing that you're looking out for and something that catches your attention?
Well, again, I can only give you my editorial based on having I had a short stay in Washington, but I know a lot of Washington people, and I think people know that once you're in the American government, you're sort of always somehow tangentially tied to it. I would say that Sam was actually very close to getting margin approval from the CTFC. There was a scenario back in October of last year where if we were on a stage like this and you had said to me, well, what's Sam's likelihood of getting margin approval? And that would have put him in a different pantheon of exchanges because he would have been up there with the CME or the New York Stock Exchange had he gotten it. I would have said to you that the probability is, 70-ish% that he was going to end up getting it. And so you have to imagine that the regulators that were about to give that to him, the effect that the exposure of Sam and the fraud that took place, how that became like this sort of very harsh regulatory pendulum swing to the opposite side. And so I think this is one of the big motivations by the SEC and the CFTC. I think it's also, Sam gave a lot of money to elected officials, not just Democrats, as was reported, but also Republicans. And I think that put egg on the face of many of these people. And so I think the regulatory response over the last 12 months has been way more aggressive and lacks commercial sense, frankly. It's not great for the United States. Again, I think of the world not from just a US-centric point of view. It's my 35th year on Wall Street, so I try to think of the world from a very global perspective. But the US has been one of the leaders, if not the leader, in the financial services industry because we've been willing to try new things, and we've had what I would say mama bear or medium-like propitious regulation. If you're going into an overzealous regulatory environment, you'll force capital, both capital and intellectual capital off the shore of the U.S., which is not great for the United States in terms of its need to maintain the mantle of financial services leadership. So I'm hoping that this regulatory pendulum swings back into the middle. And obviously, if a Republican gets elected next year, I think it'll get closer to where we want it to be.
With that in mind, with the fund you're running, SkyBridge, did you do like a huge revisit of your strategy that you're looking to do for digital assets internally? Or was there your thesis stayed the same, or you doubled down, or anything that, any lessons or?
Well, you know, again, what I would encourage people to think about this stuff long term.
Yeah.
So we made a decision, and I'll just take people back briefly. I wasn't in the White House very long, but when I was there, the Federal Reserve was writing a white paper on digitizing the U.S. dollar. In fact, I attended a meeting in the White House, and it was on a Wednesday, because I know it was a Wednesday because I was only there for one Wednesday, so that's how I know it was a Wednesday. But I was in the meeting with two Fed officials, and these guys were explaining to me what they wanted to do over the blockchain in terms of U.S. dollar digitization. So that was July of 2017. It didn't come to pass. I'm not saying it won't ever, but it was certainly speculation back then. And so when I left Washington, it was incumbent upon me to get up to speed on the blockchain and to understand it better. Most traditional financial people like myself swore it off. You know, I can, even Michael Saylor, I've had long conversations with him. I was just in Italy with him last week. We were naysayers on Bitcoin, naysayers on the blockchain. The more homework you do, and the more that you recognize what a wonderful delayering mechanism this actually is, the more excited you get about it if you're a traditional financial person. So I migrated into the space, made a decision to put about a third of our assets into the space. I think we peaked at about 50% of assets, primarily because things went up a lot in, you know, let's call it like the end of 2021, November. We didn't sell anything. We didn't add any more to our positions. This was just through appreciation. They're now back to sort of 30%. And so they were below that because of the crash that took place back in November, December of 2022. And so we haven't changed our view. And we're long-term holders of the assets that we have, long-term believers in the space. We did file for a Bitcoin ETF, which was rejected, which was great irony because it's the exact same application, the exact same lawyers and so forth that BlackRock has filed their ETF with. But we have yet to resubmit one right now. Yeah. Not saying that we won't, we're open to it. But I do really believe that if BlackRock gets this approval, and I don't want to say if, I'll say when. When BlackRock gets this approval, I think this will create a seismic change of energy in our industry.
Yeah, for the audience, what was the first year that SkyBridge started allocating for crypto?
Yeah, so the first year that our first investments were in October and November of 2020.
Oh, wow.
And so I looked at it with my team and we made a decision. There were three components to that decision. Decision number one, was Bitcoin scaling to 100 million wallets? At that time, I think Bitcoin was approximately 80 million wallets, but on its way up. I can just go off of the Kathy Wood estimates. It's probably closer to 300 million wallets today. So it just gives you a sense for where things have gone over 3 years. The second thing for me was regulation. Could we get comfortable with regulation in the U.S.? I just want to remind people about U.S. property rights. And this is one of the fundamental cornerstones of American capitalism. U.S. property rights date back prior to the origination of the United States. They go all the way back to the Magna Carta because we adopted British common law. And so once the IRS deemed Bitcoin and other digital assets property, you know, so for your tax purposes, Bitcoin is considered intangible property, I got very comfortable that regulators, despite their political motivations, wouldn't be able to disallow Bitcoin. And again, just for people that are not U.S. based, U.S. property rights, despite the political environment, despite the tribalism, that has been a sacrosanct, fundamental cornerstone of the American legal system for 200 plus years. So once they said that, I got very comfortable. And you can see these cases that are coming, despite Chairman Gensler's motivations, he can't get these cases won because all of this stuff is grounded in this common law bedrock, this foundation. And then just the third thing, which I think is very important, is storability. If you own 9 figures of Bitcoin, and at one point we were at the 10-figure number, you got to be able to store it somewhere. And so places like Fidelity, we got very comfortable with.
Yeah. Combining all the themes that came out of our talk just now, government, Asia, China, US, United States, Fed, when you were serving in American government, was there a lot of discussions around seeing Bitcoin as a tool to undermine US dollar, potentially benefiting the Chinese government or any country that's not a good ally of the United States?
So it's a really good question. So the short answer, in 2017, I would say no. So when I was in government, I would say no. In 2023, I think there is an open discussion of that. And I think that there are governmental officials in the United States are hostile to Bitcoin because they see it as a threat to the US dollar. But I don't see it that way. In fact, if you were thinking about it as a good policymaker, US governmental policy, let's say that the policy for the United States is to continue dollar global supremacy, where the US dollar is the currency standard for the world, then you would want Bitcoin in your marketplace, because ultimately a stronger economy, a stronger GDP is going to require you to have some of it centered around digital assets and some of it centered around the efficiencies of delayering the economy using the blockchain. And so I think that what sometimes happens is that policymakers get defensive and they're operating off the heel of their foot as opposed to operating off the ball of their foot. And I think the more important thing for US regulators and policymakers to think about is you want this industry in the United States. It will lead to more growth, it'll lead to more economic efficiency, it'll lead to more cost savings for our businesses, large and small. I own a restaurant in New York City, as an example. If we can bypass the credit card industry, if our margin is 15%, and we can go direct to our consumers, a wallet-to-wallet transfer, that's a possibly 3.5% savings for the restaurant. You're talking about a 20% improvement in our gross margins. And so I just want you to take that across industries. And so when I'm with regulators and they're talking about, oh no, Bitcoin's a threat, or it's going to unduly help China or other countries rise in power, I see it the opposite. I think it's very, very important for us to not be afraid of new technologies and to advance those new technologies, particularly in a country like the US.
On that note, aside from just the macro thesis and long-term thesis in crypto that you have, within crypto, is there a specific vertical that you're looking at that you find interesting, especially lately, like places like gaming, or any others vertical that you've been paying attention to?
Well, I'll disclose some of our positions. So we have a fairly large stake on our balance sheet at SkyBridge in Solana. We have a reasonable size stake in something called Vulcan's Forge. The CEO of that company, or that token, is speaking here. He'll also be joining me in Singapore. The symbol of that is PYR. It is a gaming token. It's a decentralized gaming business. I think the technology there in his studio is quite good, and I think he's here today or tomorrow, going to be making some announcements about that, and so we have that on our balance sheet. I own Algorand, which unfortunately has not done well, but has great technology, so I'm hoping there'll be a revamping there. But those are basically our larger positions. One of the positions that I'm very fond of is something called Casper Labs. For those of you guys that don't know what that is, it's CSPR, and again, it's sort of decentralized enterprise software. And I think this is something that's also going to be adopted as we get out of this current bear market. So those are just some of the names that we hold, in addition to like core positions in Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Aside from your current positions, and then whenever you're looking at new deals or new projects that are popping out, is there a specific metric or technology you're looking for? For example, like this project seems more decentralized or more scalable, more secure? Or
So, I mean, SkyBridge is, I'll just give an example. SkyBridge is a seed investor in a layer 2, it's an Ethereum-based layer 2 that we believe is creating a solution for the KYC AML problem that these large institutions are worried about. And so there are KYC AML solutions on other chains, but Ethereum being the arguably, it's obviously the largest in terms of market cap, and I would make the case that because it's the largest, it's the most scalable. There may be better technologies out there, but I'm old enough to remember the big fight between the Microsoft operating systems in the 80s and the Apple operating system. Apple may have had a better operating system, but because Microsoft had IBM behind it, it became a much bigger market share, and at least at that time, a more successful company than Apple. Wasn't until Steve Jobs got back to Apple to recreate the vision that he had for Apple, which we're living with today. But the point I'm making is that Ethereum is here to stay, and it's welded into the fabric of what I would call the blockchain economy or the digital asset economy. And so we need a layer 1 that has a AML KYC sort of layer on top of it, a layer 2. And so we're a seed investor in a project like that.
for all the projects you mentioned, do you see APAC region, and especially Korea and Japan, with a lot of population and adoption of technology, would you say those are the biggest markets? You expect those projects to do well, especially?
I do.
Yeah.
I think. Listen, I think that you have to look at the world the way it is and the way you want it to be, but you also really have to focus on where the world is going. And so, if you go back to the 1830s, the Chinese economy was roughly 30% of the world's GDP. By 1965, it got down to 2% of the world's GDP. But by 2065, it'll likely be 40-ish, perhaps even more percent of the world's GDP. And so if you look at that move, I want to be a part of that, and I want people to get comfortable with that. And you don't have to think about it as a threat. In my mind, I don't see it as a threat as much as I see it as an opportunity. And I think it's very important as business leaders and people that are thinking about common sense. What do common sense people want? We want peace with each other. We want more interdependence. We want more acceptance of each other, less tribalism. And so for all those reasons, I do believe that this is where things are going to grow, and this is where I want to be a part of it.
And I understand you're off to Hong Kong and Singapore as well after Korea. And for SkyBridge, what kind of specific...
I thought you were going to ask me where the food is better. The food's better here in Korea.
I think the answer is already settled for that one. But for Hong Kong and Singapore, is there a specific thing and value you guys are looking to capture per Hong Kong and per Singapore?
Well, again, I just think if you look at the geography of the region, American-centric people, they sort of think that Hong Kong and Seoul are like New York and Boston. They don't realize the distance traveled between these places. And so if you think of the demography, whether you're in Seoul or Hong Kong or Singapore, those markets are gigantic. And so a place like SkyBridge needs to have a presence in all three of those markets.
And for the audience, where in Asia is Solid Conference being held at the moment or regularly?
So right now, John, what is it, November 14th? So it's going to be November 14th to the 16th at the Marina Bay Sands Hotel in Singapore. We're looking to potentially have one here, and we're also going to be in Hong Kong talking to some business leaders and the government about potentially having one in Hong Kong. But I'll say something very bold. I would love to have a conference like ours in Beijing or Shanghai at some point, and I'm hoping that over the next 3 to 5 years that'll be possible.
This is something I like to do with people who went through a lot since November, and just a lot of my friends and also good industry colleagues obviously got affected with FTX. And then I think everyone is still making their way out of it or somewhat consolidated. What's your advice on people, and also how are you dealing with how we go from building from the ashes and how we build things better, how we do it right this time? Is there specific advices you have or philosophies?
I don't want to be overly reflective, but this is my 35th year on Wall Street. And so in 35 years, I've been through 9 bear markets, been to 2 crypto bear markets, the last one being incredibly painful. Everybody in this room knows I had a relationship with Sam. Sam bought a 30% stake in our business last year. And so you just have to imagine me for a moment. I went from hero on September 7th, where I was going to be working with what I thought was the second largest global crypto exchange, and we were going to be helping him grow that business and create sort of a technology transfer and a relationship generational transfer. I just want you to think of the magnitude of this. I went from hero to zero, or hero to GOAT, September to November. So I was on CNBC on the 7th of September announcing the deal. On November the 9th, I was back on CNBC explaining that it was a very high likelihood that Sam was going to get arrested. And of course, he went out to get arrested. And so I just want you to think of the magnitude of that oscillation and the pain that comes with that. And also, listen, I was close to Sam's dad. I mean, to see the pain that he went through. I mean, you know, I'm a dad. I have 5 children. If one of my kids did something like what Sam did, you know, I would be inconsolable. So when I think about the magnitude of what happened, I think there are 3 lessons from that I'd like to share with everybody. Number 1, there are only so many things in your life that you can control. You know, try to eat healthy, sleep well, be honest, live your life with high integrity. But there are other things you can't control, and that's the behavior of other people. Number 2, I want to stick on that word integrity for a second, because if you have high integrity, integrity is very close in the dictionary to opportunity. And so even if you're going through a bad moment now, or you saw your portfolio get decimated, if you stay in the game and you have high integrity, you'll get amazing amounts of opportunity. I can't tell you the number of things that have been presented to SkyBridge over the last 12 months that have been very valuable to SkyBridge. And then the third thing is, I don't know a entrepreneur that hasn't gone through a dire strait but had the intestinal fortitude to stay in it. And I'll be brief, but I want to give 3 quick examples. Let's go to Steve Jobs, fired from Apple Computer, has to return to Apple Computer. Michael Dell, who frankly helped me start SkyBridge, his laptops were catching on fire in 1993. Stock went from 41 to 7. He had to revamp the entire company in order for that company to survive. In March of 2000, we watched Amazon, which was one of the industry leaders of Web 1, go from $116 a share to $7. And people were calling it Amazon.bomb, and they said that Jeff Bezos was finished. But last time I checked, I think he shot himself in outer space in his own rocket, okay, because he adapted and he pivoted and he had the intestinal fortitude to stay in something. And so I think that is a very big lesson of the last 12 months. You have to stay in things and give yourself a good long-term perspective.
And then as we wrap up things, what would you want to take away from your visit to Korea Blockchain Week in Korea? It's just relating to SkyBridge and SALT and all your experiences combined.
Well, listen, you know, I want to meet as many people as possible. So if you see me walking around, please introduce yourself. I think that at the end of the day, I come to events like this. First of all, you guys have done an amazing job, so congratulations to you guys. It's an awesome event. So congratulations. I see you guys in the black t-shirt. I know how hard this is because we do our own events, so congratulations. But I would say that for the delegates here, there are 3 things, right? You want to meet people that you can potentially learn from or they can help your business. You want to attend some sessions where Hopefully you get an idea that sparks your behavior. And then the third thing is, I mean, you're in Seoul. You should be here to have a great time. I know I'm here to have a great time.
Awesome. And lastly, for all the New Yorkers here, what's the name of your restaurant?
It's called the Hunt and Fish Club. I named it after John Gotti, the old mafia don. I named it after his social club.
Awesome. We'll be there. And
All
thank
right,
you
guys.
so much
Thank you
for
very
joining.
much. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Justin, thank you.